Okay, well, welcome everyone. It's Suzanne Murphy here, and today we're going into how to analyze the colors of the aura. And first and foremost, I'm going to take you guys through a little bit of each color, what it means physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then we're going to go into some depth in regards to the colors of white and gray, although technically they're not considered colors. And we're going to talk about ways that we can heal the aura. And in my little PowerPoint presentation, I've got a couple things that I'm just going to sort of highlight that I think is really important to know when it comes to understanding the aura. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining today. So I'm going to refer to one of the charts that I have, and you know, when you work with the Biopulsar, these are things that are tools for you, and this is actually one of my new charts. And it goes into the color interpretation physically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually. So we're just going to jump right in and talk about some of those aspects. So I always like to talk about red first, because the red energy is something that's often missing in the aura. And when we do see it in the aura, it tends to be not always vibrant, but often it is dark and dirty. The colors of the aura and the way they're expressed, whether they're light, dark, dirty, tells us the consciousness of that organ via that color language. So red on a physical level is power, driving force. You know, it is a strong chi energy, but when it's tainted, then that could be, you know, the overabuse of that color. And if it has that white light color to it, then it's the underuse of that energy. Red on an emotional level is your passions, it's your driving force, it's your motivation. And on a spiritual level, it's all about I exist on this planet. And, you know, one of the things that I often talk about when it comes to the red energy, it is your power of existence. It's the one that grounds you here on planet Earth. So when you have a strong connection to your red, then that's really important, because that's going to help you manifest more. So I love it when I see red in the aura, but more importantly, when I see it in the brain, because then I know that person has passion in their thoughts. They're excited about life. You know, red can also mean practicality in the brain. Now, orange on a physical level is connected to the water element. So it governs a lot of our water organs, and orange on an emotional, mental level is about freedom, and it's the freedom of thoughts. Your thoughts can be very unlimited. It really is that unlimited energy or limitless energy. Also, orange is enthusiasm. It's a creative energy. On a spiritual level, it is the energy which is the power of now, and it helps us to, you know, take any of our beliefs to that very strong, enthusiastic level. Yellow is the color of the mind power, and yellow on a physical level can mean toxins, parasitic activity when it's tainted. When it's positive and bright, it means that organ is processing its thoughts on a clear method, on a very concise method. Emotionally and mentally, it is much to do with our mental intelligence. And on that emotional level, it's our optimism. It's our, how else can I say it? But it's that positive can-do attitude. And yellow is very much a team player, so it likes to share their wealth of knowledge, or its wealth of knowledge. On a spiritual level, it's the energy of the ego, but I always think about it in this way. When the ego is intact, when it's healthy, when it's vibrant, when it's positive, it is a selfless ego. When it's on the negative and tainted and dark, then it will be selfish. Versus if it is underused, then it could be unselfish, but to the level of not being able to take for its own survival. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, good. Green, now that of course is the color of optimal energy. It's a good energy flow. On a physical level, it means that organ or that part of the brain is healthy. On a emotional, mental level, green is about transformation And it is a heart emotional energy. So it has a lot to do with relationships, team building on that level of, one's family dynamics, work environment. Green is very much a compassionate energy. And on a spiritual level, it is the bridge between the higher realms and the physical realm. So that way it helps to integrate things, on that emotional level. Now, blue is a cooling color. And so when an organ is blue, that means it could be a little bit cold to the touch. And on a mental level, blue is also an energy of knowledge, but it's more holistic thought, more holistic knowledge. On that emotional level, it is communicative. It has an ability to express itself and how it feels. And on a spiritual level, blue is a really good color when it comes to anything holistic. So it wants to see the full potential of everything. It just doesn't see things from that analytical perspective, but that emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical level. It is that holisticness. Indigo on a physical level can be a little bit excess energy. And on an emotional, mental level, it's very empathetic. And it is a very deep understanding energy. I love indigo people because they have that mentality of thinking outside of the box. I always sort of put it into context of Albert Einstein was brilliant in his own right, and he developed the theory of quantum physics, not because it was in any book, but he thought outside of the box. And that's the thing about the indigo energy. It's more cosmic, a higher frequency, and so therefore, it has that potential to just sort of intuitively think about things, I guess might be a good way of saying it. On a spiritual level, it is that soul to soul connection. So it's a very strong energy where, it's not the fluff. It wants to, understand more about life processes. It wants to understand more about relationships. So it's a very deep energy on that spiritual level. Violet. Now, violet is all-encompassing. Again, it is a hyperactive energy, and we're going to go into some more dynamics when we start reading the colors of the aura more in-depthly. On a mental, emotional level, it's very connected to the emotions. It has the ability to see the beauty of everything. It connects with everything because it is the top chakra. So in a way, it kind of looks down and it just perceives things from multiple perspectives. Mentally, it's a very creative energy. It's the energy of the visionary, which of course, on a spiritual level, people who are visionaries often are seeing the bigger picture for mankind. So it can be a very good energy on that higher spiritual level. So that in a nutshell is just a brief analysis of each color, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So I'm going to go into the slide presentation, and I'm just going to take you through a little bit of a tutorial because obviously when we're looking at the aura picture, there's different things that we can see. Okay, so the first picture here is showing you about cracks in the aura. And what happens is when there's a lot of stress in our aura resultant of mismanagement, then it can create cracks. And we can see this in the aura picture somewhat. Now, what can create cracks in the aura can be drugs and alcohol. Whenever we abuse things, and it could even be an extenuation of, even excess, bad diet and other things, then that can create cracks in our aura because we're inundating ourselves with lower frequency modalities. Even medicine, unfortunately, medicine is not created as a cure, but often as a way to take away pain or to sort of repress the problem. And so therefore the chemical drugs, when they're brought into the body, can cause havoc on the body. So what I was going into is the fact that when we abuse something, whether it's drugs, alcohol, medicine, or tobacco, it can create this weakened auric tissue, which can result in damage on a physical level. So we can see this by seeing cracks in the picture, or we can see this by seeing unclean aura colors. And when the aura is weak and unhealthy, that's when negativity and foreign spirits can enter into our aura. And in a way, it's kind of like where all of a sudden you'll have these random negative thoughts, then you know that your aura can be damaged. And it can happen to anyone where all of a sudden we just have this open access where we can just sort of get that negative, negativity coming in. And also we can see that lack of energy in another form, which would be through the colors. And that's when we'll see dark and dirty colors, or we'll see grays in the aura. And I know when I'm tired, I do show gray in my aura. And of course, my goal is always to make sure that my aura is shining as brightly as possible. But when you are tired, because you're driving yourself too much, then what ends up happening is your natural fuel becomes weakened, and then you'll go into that burnout. And that burnout can represent itself in different areas of your aura. For myself, if I drive myself too much, then I'll actually see it in my spine, where my spine turns gray. And that means I'm physically depleted of chi. And I do what I call my little crash and burn session, where I'll go home and I'll fall asleep about 6 o'clock at night, and I wake up 6 o'clock the next morning, because I need to re-energize myself. And because if I'm staying up late at night, focusing on some tasks, then I'm not getting that proper sleep, which would then drive my chi into a weakened state. So lack of energy can be caused by tiredness, negativity, depression, unhappiness. And when we see a lower frequency color in an organ, then that's going to represent the dehydration, lack of mobility, energy weakness, and pain and discomfort. And again, for those of you who have the Biopulsar, you'll be able to see, when a client or yourself has these weakened areas. And then our job as an aura counselor is to teach people how they can bring love and light into that area, so we can re-energize that part of the body. And so we can get rid of, any darker, dirty color and transform it into a positive frequency. And when we see gray in the brain, that can mean depression, disassociation, and even, irritation and anger if we start to see that gray muddled with some red. And of course, extreme stress. So those are some of the things that we can see in the actual aura picture. And we want to look at outside stressors. So for example, other people's auras will affect us. And I certainly know I've walked into a room and I've kind of felt the residual of some negativity. Similarly, if we're around people who are having a bad day, we instinctively know it. And so therefore, other people's auras will affect us, because when our aura is beaming out and somebody else's aura is beaming out, and our two auras are meeting each other, we will get a sense of what's going on with the other person without them even having to say anything. And this is why, even as children, we understand when things aren't, as harmonious in our life, because on an energetic level, we perceive that. But sometimes adults may say things like, oh, you're just a child, don't worry yourself about this. But yet we still sense these things, which can cause a little bit of, controversy with our energy, because energetically we know the truth, but other people are telling us different. And this is how some blockages actually get started in the energy field. Our thoughts and emotions also affect our aura, and likewise, other people's thoughts and emotion, again, going into other people's auras will affect us, but, their thoughts and emotions will affect us just as our own. The planets will affect us. I always think about when the planets are in different position, it creates our ebbs and flows of our tides and our oceans. So similarly, we'll be affected by planetary alignment. And vitality from the sun. Here in Vancouver, I think we have like 200 days of rain annually, which is a lot. And so therefore we don't. Okay, so vitality from the sun affects us. When we're out in the sunshine, our whole energy matrix is being blessed with solar energy. So sunlight is really detrimental to our health and well-being. And we know that when we're in the sun, we feel more vibrant and optimistic and positive. Our environment also has a big influence on our aura. You know, when you think about when you're in a room that has no windows or there's lack of circulation, you can feel the heaviness of the environment weighing on you. So, you know, again, sometimes what we have to do is we have to shift, you know, our environment to be more positive by using tools that will help uplift us. You know, this is why, you know, Colour Energy sells a lot of different products, but we have this awesome heavenly scent diffuser that sends out ionized particles that will actually help, you know, with the negative ions in your body. And then when you add essential oils to it, it's a wonderful combination to actually smell some uplifting fragrances that can really create an optimistic mood. EMFs, and that's sort of the picture that is being shown here from Wi-Fi and, you know, cell phones and computers and, you know, anything that's electronic has an influence on us. And in fact, I was just reading an article that now it is so hard to determine the influence of EMFs because there's so much EMFs now in the environment, we can't even get a baseline of a low EMF frequency in a typical environment. So that even shows you now that we're being inundated with so much EMFs. Our chakra flow, karmic disturbances, kundalini energy, these are other things that influence our aura. Now, the next picture is, in a way, I want to go into, you know, talking about when we look at an aura, what are we looking at? We can see that sometimes we might see darkened colors, sometimes we might see gray, sometimes we might see white. And literally, as an aura detective, what we're looking at is these different colors, where they're located and what it can possibly mean. So when it comes to the aura diagnostics, we have all these different charts that you get that go into the meaning of the colors and what it represents. And we talk about the brightness of the colors, if the color is dull or pastel, or whether it's dark and dirty, all these colors mean something. So with this picture, for example, we see red above the head. And does that red look positive? Should be, or does it have some sort of taintedness to it? So in this case, we can see that the red is dark and dirty. And red, when it's dark and dirty, it could mean that that person is stuck in their thoughts, that they're feeling that things are unjust, you know, that they are lacking confidence. They could be a little bit dominating or domineering. They could be dictatorial, angry, and this person was angry, and they were angry about a lot of things. They were angry about their health condition. They were angry that they weren't able to, you know, accomplish certain things at that time. And we can also see that it's coupled with gray in the brain, and that gray also is indicating that lack of connection. And when we talk about lack of connection, it's lack of connection to humanity, lack of connection to spirit, lack of connection to emotions, lack of connection to thought. And when I see a lot of gray in the brain, I tend to ask questions like, have you noticed lately that you're unclear in your thoughts, or that, you know, you're just finding that your attitude might not be as sharp as it could be? Or I might ask along the lines of, have you noticed you've been more forgetful lately? Because when we see gray in the brain, it can affect us in many different ways. Remember, all color has that emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical connection. And the physical aspect is the last point people will get affected. But I know there was one time I was going through a bit of a phase in my life, and I could see that gray was creeping into the brain. And I could tell that my attitude wasn't as positive. Now, you know, of course, I think about what you show other people versus what you're feeling inside. And I remember one of my Biopulsar owners, she went to, or pardon me, she had one of her mentors get a scan on the Biopulsar, and she saw all this gray in her mentor's brain. And she said, oh, well, according to our book studies, when there's gray in the brain, that can mean, you know, depressed thoughts. And this woman said, you know what, because I teach, people see me as a happy-go-lucky person, but you know what? I've been suffering inside. And this Biopulsar owner was very surprised, because here this woman was what she thought very positive, but on the inside is where she was feeling that negativity, where she was feeling depressed. And this is why the biopulsar is so critical, because when we see these different things in the body and the brain, then we can understand that this is what their aura is showing, and there's a reason why it's showing. And you can't be deceived by what people are saying to you, because the aura does not lie. Okay. And when you see these things, you just have to probe and ask what the condition could be. Now, because of the fact I deal a lot on, on a level of health, then I can look at other reasons why there can be gray. And, again, if we look at the fact, first and foremost, that gray reflects, depression. And on a physical level, that depression can mean that there's no water getting into the cells. Okay, as well as it can mean emotional depression, mental depression, spiritual depression. And depending on the colors that surround the energy would tell you what kind of depression. So we can see that in this picture, the gray is combined with red. So this is somebody who's feeling frustrated with life. They're depressed about life. They're not getting what they want out of life. And because there's orange with it, then that could also mean there's somewhat of an emotional depression that's combined with this. And this person was suffering from depression. So again, we can see with all that gray that would be a problem. But sometimes we may see that gray before they feel it as that. Now, again, sometimes depending on the person themselves, they may not instantly own up to what you're seeing. Sometimes you have to ask questions in a certain way, or get a sense of what the person is trying to tell you in their own words or own language. So I know that, again, I've had people where, no, I'm not feeling depressed. And then I'll go, okay, well, let's talk about some of the other possibilities. That when I see gray in the brain, this tells me that your, cognition may be a little bit weak in some areas. Like, have you noticed you've been more forgetful as to where you're putting your car keys? Right? It could be as simple as that. And what happened with me, I was seeing gray in the brain, and I absolutely was more forgetful, but I still had a lot of astuteness, but I did feel that my memory capabilities had diminished. So sometimes it could be in different ways. And that's why we have to probe and, ask the client more so as to how they're feeling on these different levels. And remember, when we see gray, especially in the brain, that's indicating that the water isn't getting to the brain, and the brain consists of 80% water. So if we're seeing gray in the brain, that means lack of electrolytes. And I was just talking to one of my Biopulsar owners the other day, and they were indicating a situation of a client that had experienced stroke. And here is where we can actually see pre-symptoms of things that can damage the brain. And for example, if we see gray in the cerebellum is the back of the head. That means that there's lack of energy getting up to our brain. That could be one of the first areas that we may see symptoms that are a precondition of stroke. So again, we have to look at the colors and what it can mean. But first and foremost, I do look at it on a physical level that it's dehydration. And when I have that conversation with people to find out how much water they drink, often I find that they don't drink enough water. And this is so important. We don't say that you're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water a day just because. We're supposed to be drinking that 8 glasses of water a day because electrically, we need that water to support ourselves, but because we're comprised of 70% water in our body and 80% in the brain, we need that lubrication. It is what feeds our cell. It's what keeps our cells active and alive. So when we see that gray in the brain, we know that the depression or the depressed thoughts or the memory issues or the negativity is just around the corner. If they're not at that point telling you that they're depressed or that they're having these cognitive, capabilities as a aura counselor, I'm going to try to reverse it anyways. So before they actually physically feel it, I'm going to be putting them on a protocol to get that water into the cells. And, you know, to do things like that, we want to work with cell salts and getting people bathing in salt water or using a salt spray. And this is one of the things I've been recommending a lot lately, is making, you know, a salt brine out of our Andes salt. And I recommend the Andes salt for several reasons. But when you make a salt brine, what you can do is put the salt water in a spray bottle and spray it on the areas that you know you have stress. And when I say body parts that have stress, usually where pain and discomfort is, there is the lack of energy flow. And so to get that electrolyte activity strong, by spraying salt water right on that point of problem, what we're doing is we're energizing the body, because the salts are loaded with minerals. And then again, we can get that connection happening again. So, you know, when I see gray in the cerebellum, I'm suggesting people spray the salt water on the nape of the neck to get that contact going right away. Because even if I have them drinking, you know, cell salts or salt water, or, you know, adding trace elements or micro minerals to their daily protocol, it may not be enough to get to their brain, because the body will use it where it thinks it needs to use it first and foremost. And the top of the head is actually one of the last areas that the body will remineralize. So when you're using that saltwater brine, you could even, you know, spray it on the top of your head just to get that electrolyte activity happening. Okay, so going back to the gray in the brain, whatever color I see combined with the gray tells me the attitude of what's going on. When I see the gray, then that person is unable to think practically. And again, their passion could be tainted with some irritation. You know, red is that, you know, energy of excitement. So maybe they don't feel enthusiastic about life. When I see gray with orange, then that's emotional repression. And sometimes that can even be reflected in a bipolar disorder. So when you have that gray, it could be happy one minute, because orange energy is our energy of the inner child and joy and happiness, but combined with gray, that could mean that the inner child is depressed and that orange emotional energy is depressed. And that could also extend into the creativity is depressed. Yellow is mental depression. And I remember I was reading this one guy, and, you know, he had this yellow and gray combination. And when we got into the conversation, he was very depressed because of the fact he felt that he should be further in what he wanted to do. He thought he was so smart that, you know, he should be further along in his life spiritually as well as, you know, professionally. And he was upset about that and depressed about it, because that yellow, you know, ego energy is that perfectionist, and therefore he just wasn't feeling that he was at that level of perfection. So that mental energy was depressing, you know, or that combination of the gray and the yellow was mentally depressing him. Green with gray, that again would be an emotional depression, and green is an optimal energy. However, when it's surrounded or combined gray, then again, you can understand where there would be, you know, lack of clarity on that green level of love and compassion. Blue combined with the gray would be, you know, again, that depression when it comes to holistic thought, or, you know, that connection to your spiritual truth. Gray with indigo would be on a connection, and again, I'm going to go into the negativity of the indigo, which would be anxiety, fear, fright. So you can see how that gray would amplify that. Gray with the violet hues would be lack of inspiration, lack of that spiritual connection. And sometimes you'll even see gray combined with white. And that is a struggle between a high consciousness and a lower consciousness. You know, so you can imagine gray combined with any color can cause, you know, havoc with you know, one's clarity of thought or one's, you know, clarity of emotions. Okay. So with this person as well, you know, there's certain indicating factors that their life force is weakened, because we can see this dull orange in the spinal region, and every area in the picture is indicating a different part of the body. And just to sort of illustrate We do have a body language guide, which you're not able to see at this moment, but it does go into, every area in the aura and where it's connected to on the body. And of course, we show that connection with the hand reflex zones on our hand reflex zone chart. Now, because of this person shows a lot of gray in the brain, that is pulling the top chakras down somewhat. So you can see in the chakra analysis that's right beside the aura picture here, that the crown chakra is at the number 9 value. So that does tell you that their spiritual connection is weak, because that number 9 value, it should be at the very least at 50. And, here we're at 9, that's 41 points lower than where it should be. And of course, with the chakra flow, we're looking at between 50 and 70 as the average area of where the chakras should be. So when we see 1, 2, or 3 chakras below that 50-point range, then we know that there's lack of vitality. And it starts at the crown here, where the crown is at 9%. So that indicates, again, there is that struggle with their belief system, with their spiritual connection. And when I'm doing a reading, I'm looking at evidence. I'm looking at the aura picture combined with the organs, combined with the chakra values. So this way I get a clear indicating picture of the chakra flow, what's going on with their aura colors, and of course, what could be happening on a health level. So for this person, I would be definitely recommending anything violet to get that strong connection back to the crown chakra. And when people don't feel inspired, that's when you'll see their crown chakra flow. And again, this is what I love about the system for my own health and wellness, is because anytime I go on the Biopulsar, it's exactly showing me where I'm at in my consciousness, whether, I'm really connected on a spiritual level consciously, or a mental level, or a emotional level, or, where I'm at physically. So I love that fact that I can get all this information. Now, in the next slide, analyzing the colors of the organs. This gives you a clear indication of what's going on with every organ. So you can see in this case, there's several brain parts that are in the gray. So you can see that the consciousness is having, a struggle. And I know that this person was struggling with so many factors in their life. They lost their job, their husband lost their job, their kids were in university and they were paying for their kids' education. That's a lot of stress to have all of a sudden, to try to figure out, how you're going to, survive, and how you're going to keep your kids in school when, you have a lack of income. And her spiritual network had collapsed because, of course, there are time periods, like right now, it's really hard, to have that strong spiritual connection when, churches are closed, so therefore, people do feel more isolated. And you can see that the mouth is gray, which is indicating who is this person able to talk to, and the stress that they're feeling in their neck being gray. And, so that gray in these different organs are telling you, there's a lot of psychosomatic information that's going on there. And it's hard to think clearly when you don't have strong energy flow. And also, there can be other factors connected to the gray as well as the white. And I'm just going to briefly talk about that, because when we see gray in an organ, we can consider some of the factors, like, is that organ getting enough life force? Absolutely not, because when it's in gray, again, it means lack of electrolytes. And what will happen is that organ can then become atrophied. It starts to shrink because it's not getting, the elements of water or nutrition into it. And so there's nothing that is sustaining it. We can also see that, it can be, causing holes in that organ. And so, for example, if somebody has a leaky gut over a period of time, and we start to see, parts of the organ that relate to the digestive system in gray, then we can understand that that organ is in a serious condition, because, it just doesn't have that life force, and it can have holes in it. Gray in the aura can also mean chemical toxicity. And even chemotherapy, I've had a number of people who have had chemotherapy and it has showed up in gray in those specific organs. And the other day I had somebody on the Biopulsar and their esophagus was gray, and that could be caused by acid burn. So when people have acid reflux, then over time that can cause the esophagus to be gray because they're being burned with acid, or the esophagus is being burned with acid. And that can relate to chronic conditions and the degeneration of cells. And also it can connect to decay. And of course, we know that it means, deterioration, disconnection. Also, it could be that electrical short circuit. It can represent, again, that atrophied, shriveled state. EMF influences, because again, when we have holes in our aura, then that allows EMF pollution to get in. Energetic emptiness, extreme weak metabolism. And if it becomes in an atrophied state, then it can become hardened. It can also mean heavy metals, and specifically if we see the heavy metals in the mouth area or the cerebellum, that often is a dumping ground for toxicity. And when an organ is gray, that's lack of elasticity of the organ, because remember, it becomes hardened and atrophied. And it can also, on a psychological level, mean lack of support, because if an organ is gray, then it's not able to be vital and participating. Now, how much gray we see could also mean lethargy. The person is very tired all the time. And in certain organs, it can result in malnutrition. I always, share a story. I had one gentleman where I couldn't even get a contact on his small intestine. And the small intestine is key for nutritional support. It helps to absorb the nutrition. Well, of course, seeing that his small intestine was gray, that was the first thing that I was, indicating to him. And he shared with me, and I should tell you that he was definitely underweight. I'm sure he didn't weigh more than 100 pounds wet. And even though he was, a smaller frame, when I mentioned the fact that I thought he was malnutrition, he said, for 10 years I've been sick, and for 10 years I've been struggling to get answers. And recently I was diagnosed with a very small rare intestine disease, and you don't even know me, and within a couple of minutes you're telling me that I'm not observing my nutrition, and in fact, because of that, I could be malnutritioned. Okay, and then again, on the emotional level, that could be negativity, it could be grief, it could be denial. And we look at the organs where we see these things. Sometimes when there is, something going on in an area, that could extend to gray being in the heart, because when there's something of emotional, and an emotional effect. And I guess where I'm going with this is I happened to be in Denver after the Columbine shooting 3 days afterwards, and I did hundreds of people, and I couldn't believe how much gray I saw in the heart. And again, if you think about it, if gray is in the heart, that could be reflective of the depression of the emotions, the grief of our emotions felt on that heartfelt level, and especially when it's in a community. And I heard the same thing after 9/11, that in New York, as well as surrounding states, that there was a lot of gray in the heart region because of all the grief that was being experienced. And gray could be an injury of some sort, an accident. And because I broke my jaw and I've had dental surgery, the mouth is an area that I show gray. But one of the things, when I first was working with the Biopulsar, my mouth actually showed a lot of toxicity. The gray was quite dark, which was telling me about the toxins that were in the cells of my mouth. However, after I did house cleaning, got all the mercury out of my mouth and did some detox programs, I saw that dark gray in my mouth lighten. But because I've had multiple surgeries, because I've broken my jaw and my jaw is crooked, then of course, the energy in that area is at a weaker state, and until I can find a permanent solution, and this is something I'm always working on, is how can I create more energy flow in whatever area of the body that I express in a weakened state. And of course, gray means exhaustion, depletion. And it also means that there's lack of oxygen in that area, because again, if there's gray, it's void of energy. So there's not going to be that, that strength and the power. And sometimes you'll see gray in a person's respiratory system. I've seen gray when people have pneumonia or, a cold or, again, even chemotherapy. I've seen gray in the chest area for people who have had cancer in that area. And gray can also be the result of poor circulation. When I see gray in the feet, that's telling me that they have no vitality in the feet. And often people will share with you they have, cold feet all the time. Well, when there's not energy to the extremities, then you can understand where or why we would see gray in the feet. And of course, when there's lack of circulation, lack of energy, then that area becomes more rigid. And when it's in the spine, for example, that could indicate weak blood. Yeah, so that's a lot of things that we could look at gray. Now, for the white energy, that's a total opposite of gray, because gray means lack of, where white means excess of energy. That means an energetic jam, an abundance of energy. It can also mean astral energy, and that astral energy can be healing energy. A lot of times when I've seen scans of people who do Reiki, I can see that there's white in the body when people are doing Reiki, because we can keep somebody's hand on the biopulsar and see the dynamics of the aura changing. So I've seen when people have done energy healing on someone, and the patient or the client has their hand on the system, we can actually see the white energy come into the body. Now, however, I also had a Reiki practitioner where she had a lot of white in her body. And I said to her, it looks like you're hanging on to the Reiki energy. And she actually started crying because she felt that it was building up in her and that she wasn't able to release it. So we went over a lot of steps on how she could disperse the high energy that was coming in. Now, also, if you see white in certain areas like the mouth, it could mean that they get blisters in their mouth, or it could be blisters on the skin or in the organ. Again, when acid is boiling up, then we may see it as white to begin with. And in fact, when people have had food poisoning, we see white throughout their whole digestive tract. And again, it's the body trying to heal itself, but it could be that acid boiling up that is also seeing that white. And if people drink a lot of coffee, then sometimes we can see white in their aura, because coffee is an excess stimulant. And we can see that white can cause a disruptive behavior, especially when you're seeing it in the brain. A lot of times when I see white in the brain, a little bit of white is okay. But when you see a lot of white, note if the person is connecting with you, or if they constantly seem to be changing their mind a lot, because when there's an excess buildup in the brain, it's hard to focus, it's hard to concentrate. And as a biopulsar owner, I see these things when I'm too much in my head, where I have accumulated a lot of energy because I'm working a lot on an intuitive level. I will see an abundance of white in my head, but I feel that disconnect because there's too much white in my brain. So imagine somebody, and you may even have a lot of white in your brain, where you're at that high state of consciousness or using a lot of spiritual energy, but it's hard to stay grounded. And a way I associate it is where you're driving from point A to point B, or you're walking from point A to point B, and all of a sudden you get to your destination, but you don't remember how you got there. It's because you were so high up in the energy. And it could even be, if you have gray in the brain as well, there's that lack of consciousness. But I see that a lot with people who have white in their brain. They're not cognitively here because their frequency in the brain is so high. It can also mean an excess of air. When people are breathing too fast, you'll see that they'll show high frequencies in the chest and often white in the chest. And as I mentioned, it could be poisoning, so it could be the expulsion of toxicity. White also is an extremely sensitive energy, so when you see it in the body, again, you can ask the person if they are very sensitive, and depending on what organ you see white would illustrate that sensitivity. I actually show white in my nose, and that's really interesting because I do have a heightened sense of smell. And so therefore that white is indicating that my ability to process is at a heightened state. Okay. When people are, I mentioned about the healing. So sometimes you'll see white in an area where, you know, there's healing, such as a broken bone or anything along that line, you might see white. And white also reflects too much electricity, which often when I see people having white, especially a lot of white in the brain, they'll tell you that they don't do well around electronics, that they give off a lot of shocks, and things like watches don't work well for them, or they short out computers. Again, it's that ungroundedness when there's too much white in the body and brain. And back to the chest, when we see white in the chest area, it could mean heart palpitations as well. And it could also extend into high blood pressure. Okay. And depending on where you see the white, it could be overdrive or overworked. And yeah, it could also mean pain. And I remember Martina telling me that white could be like a hot cold, where, you know, ice, when you touch it, is cold, but after a while it almost burns you. It's that hot cold energy. So when we're assessing the different organs, again, we're looking at the color frequency, you know, going from gray, which is absence of energy. Red is also a lower frequency, but on a physical level, it can mean that heat and inflammation. Orange is that water imbalance. It's also an acidic condition, similar to yellow is also an acidic condition, and that makes it a prime constitution, breeding ground for parasites and toxicity. And then greens, turquoises are neutral. When we get to blue, it starts to go into a cooling energy. And then of course, when we go into the indigos and violet, that is, you know, very high energy, which can lead to that energetic jam. And when you get to white, that's, you know, too much energy. But again, if it's in the brain, then it has more to do with the consciousness versus the organ. Shouldn't be resonating in white too long. Now, if it's momentarily, like when you're doing an energy treatment such as Reiki, then what you're doing is you're trying to heal that part of the body. So we may see that part of the body registering in white, but we don't want to see it white permanently. So when you do a second scan or a third scan, whenever you're seeing white in the aura, it could reflect that that body part is working overtime, and it shouldn't be working overtime continuously. Then it will become exhausted and eventually it'll deplete itself. Now with the next slide, I make the connection of the color to the constitution. So I want to show you in this picture where we're looking at the cerebellum is at the bottom, and so is the forehead. And there are several organs that the red measuring line is showing at the bottom. And I circled a couple of them with yellow so you can see exactly what I'm looking at. So when you see the graph box at the bottom, that reflect in the gray color. So when we looked at this person's aura picture, there were several body parts that were gray, and in the organ assessment feature with the organ graphs, we would see the graphs at the bottom of the line. Where this measuring line shows up tells us the color and the frequency level. And you'll notice on the cerebellum, it started around the number 4 value, and the strokes on the sidebar actually go from 2, 4, 6, 8 to 10 at the top. So it starts around the 4 value, and then it starts to slide down, and eventually the cerebellum collapses and it just literally flat lines. Because it didn't start at a strong level, there was already indication that that organ was weak. And over a short period of time, it couldn't substantiate holding the energy and it collapsed. And we see that in the temporal brain, the back of the brain, both the forehead and the pituitary pineal gland areas didn't even make a contact, which again, you can sort of see that, you know, on a cognitive level, there would be difficulties because we're not seeing that connection. So when I'm looking at an organ and I see it at the bottom, even if I get a contact to begin with, I note if it slipped down to the bottom, you know, indicating that that area was weak. Versus if we look at the small, or pardon me, the large intestine, we could see it's at a hyperactive level where the red measuring line is exactly at the top of the bar graph, and that would be indicative of the white color. So if I go back to the slide ahead, you can see that beside the large intestine was the white color. Okay, now when we're interpreting the organ, I'm going to go to the next slide, which is the Oroscope software interpretation. And you can see that the cerebrum, the forehead are all in the vicinity of white. So if we're talking about the range of color, then we can see that there is some sort of experience with a mental block. The ability to consciously absorb and analyze information is limited. And sometimes you'll get people that are in total denial, but yet you can see that they're not grasping things because they're going, what do you mean by that? I'm not understanding. Well, that is somebody who's not consciously absorbing the information. Watch for reactions because, again, people can be in denial. And remember, gray is an energy of denial. And so when people are denying that they're feeling these symptoms, it's just a matter of trying to get to the point where they're consciously aware of that. And that can take a little bit of time because I tell everyone, you never know how you are until after the fact. So when I went through, you know, my little bit of you know, cognitive disconnection, you know, my attitude wasn't as good as it could have been. I felt that my, you know, attitude was more negative. I definitely had depressed thoughts. But when I got out of it, it was easier for me to look back and go, wow, I wasn't in a good place. But sometimes when you're in that, you know, gray cloud, I guess we can say, then we don't feel as connected. And there's no right or wrong when it comes to the colors. When I see gray, I don't think of it as a negative. I think of it sort of like grass. When you see grass and it's dead, all you have to do is water it and it comes back to life. That's the way I look at energy. Once we're cognitive of where our energy has collapsed, we just simply nurture and water that area because we know water will, you know, create that reconnection. And then from there, then we can, you know, move the energy, okay, or stimulate the energy. So when we see gray, you can see that the life force is weak, the attitude will be weak, okay. Okay, so that in a nutshell is, you know, aspects of the aura. Now, what do we do to heal that? And, you know, this is one of the things I talk about all the time is that when it comes to energy, the best thing that we can do is stimulate ourselves with as many energy forms as possible to get the vibration up. And so in this case, with this person being low of violet, I would be prescribing things like the violet color therapy eyewear. You know, we have our violet spiritual spray. You can spray above the head and reap the benefit of the color frequency. We can use, you know, oils like perfumes and put them on our wrist. We could use high vibrational essences that, you know, help to raise the vibration. Literally what we want to do is bring in the colors that are lacking. And sometimes we'll target the organs. So if I see an organ gray, I can actually recommend any color because any color is better than gray. Okay, gray's at the bottom where all the other colors are, you know, above gray. So I use my intuition. If I feel that somebody is emotionally depressed, I might use orange to bring back that contact with joy and happiness. If I feel that the gray is resultant of mental fatigue or, you know, a negative mental attitude, I might recommend yellow to, you know, get that clarity and that focus back. So we can use different colors. as well, we can look exactly at the chakra flow and determine, okay, well, if the crown is weak because we're seeing gray in the brain, then we need to bring in the high vibratory energy of violet, because violet is a very fast frequency, so it'll speed up parts of the brain or the organ to resonate at a higher frequency. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to bring in the frequency to shift the frequency that's existing. And I rely on tools because I believe that, especially when our consciousness is at a lower rate, at a lower frequency, it's hard to get there mentally. And this is why a lot of people fail in their protocol. Imagine people that have gray in the brain. One, they're not going to remember half of what you said. You know, two, they're still possibly in some level of denial. You know, three, because their cognitive abilities are weakened, then they just might not fully get what you're trying to educate them on. Whereas when you put them on a color, you know, healing protocol and get them doing different things, what they're doing is they're raising their vibration without the consciousness. But the consciousness will follow. It's sort of like reciting an affirmation over and over and over again. At first, you may not get that affirmation. You may not be convinced of it. Like somebody who's in poor health, if they're saying an affirmation of "I am strong, I am healthy," they may not believe it to begin with. But after they start getting more power, then they'll be going, "I am strong, I am healthy." They'll feel it more in their energy, versus at the beginning, they might be going, "I am strong, I am healthy," but they don't feel it because in a way, you know, what they're saying isn't matching their vibration. So if we can, you know, increase the vibration, then people can match the vibration of what they're trying to accomplish. Okay. Okay, so we're at the end of our time. And so now I'm going to open it up for conversation. If anybody has any questions about what we just talked about, then now's the time to ask them.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you? Oh, I can't hear you. I'm going to unmute when I ask this question, but you didn't cover clear auras, or did I miss that?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I didn't cover clear auras. So when we talk about the white energy, white is literally translucent. It's like white light that comes from the sun. Okay, so it is what we would call, you know, translucent or clear.
Okay, great. That answered that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I can even elaborate on that more so, because again, white light is the combination of all colors that when combined in, you know, in equal amounts will create that white light. And this is when all our chakras are communicating with each other, all our colors are integrated, then you will see that aura that will actually emanate in that whiteness. And I do have some very spiritual minded people that do very deep meditations on the Biopulsar, and they can actually see their chakras going to 100 and literally their whole aura turning into white light.
Okay, thank you. Just I wanted to ask because I've been told that I have a clear aura, so I was interested in that.
Yeah, and because our system is registering, you know, more on a physical level, then, you know, that might have been, you know, on a level of one of your more spiritual levels, but on a physical level, you would probably show more colors.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Susanna, question.
Sure, Donna. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hey, I did a scan on a gentleman a couple of weeks ago who his scan was wonderful, right? All the colors were beautiful. There was no gray. It looked really good. And just the other day he got told he had cancer and it was terminal. So I don't understand why nothing showed up on his scan.
Now, did you use any hand gel or anything like that to get that contact?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that I try to tell everyone: try not to use the contact gel initially. and get the natural scan, see where your energy's at, because as soon as you use that gel, what you're doing is you're creating a bit of a placebo effect, because now you've coated the hand with the contact gel, where the first indicating factor was you couldn't get a contact. So that would actually have told you that that person's energy was so weak to begin with, you had to use a gel to create the contact.
Because so many, these days there's so many people with really dry hands. We're having that issue with a lot of people.
But you know what? I can tell you, when I first started doing, aura readings with the Biopulsar 20 plus years ago, I did not see the amount of gray that I see in the aura today. And if we look at what has changed in the last 20 years, well, 20 years ago, hardly anybody owned a cell phone. Hardly anybody was on their computer 24/7 as we are today. So the amount of electromagnetic smog was limited 20 years ago. And also the quality of our food was better 20 years ago. Now we're over harvesting our fields. And so therefore, the amount of essential minerals that are in our food, or macro minerals and micro minerals that are in our food today are at a fraction. They're saying, compared to 50 years ago, a cup of spinach had like 150 milligrams of iron. Now today, a cup of spinach has like 30 milligrams of iron. It's ridiculous. So there's so much out there that's affecting our energy. And, also 50 years ago, we had few illnesses. Now the amount of labels that we have when it comes to illness are in abundance. We have thousands upon thousands of diagnosed illnesses. So things have changed from 20 years ago. What I see today is not what I saw 20, 25 years ago.
Okay.
A comment, Suzanne.
Sure.
When I first started doing readings and I didn't see nice colors, I would use the gel. I never use the gel anymore. So if the client will rub their hands together, it gets circulation going in the hand, even if it's dry, and you will get a reading. It may not sustain, and it doesn't sustain because of the low energy, but you've got a truer reading than, just forget the gel. Unless the hand is so dry that you just can't get any contact at all.
Yeah. And
thanks.
And because of the fact the gel is chemical, it's just something that they include, because obviously, AuraMed, when they sell the technology, they include the gel because it is a medical grade gel that is known to help with conductivity. Water works. And as Nancy said, when people rub their hands together, you start to create more electricity because you're also warming up the hands, right? And so therefore you're getting that electrical conductivity. If you need to enhance it, then you can have like a spray bottle of water, or I even suggest our tea tree floral water, because then it's sanitizing the hand at the same time. But you just do one squirt, that's all you need, and then get them to rub their hands together for 15 to 20 seconds to burn off some of that excess water that you've put on the hand. Because again, you don't want pockets of water or cream or that biofeedback gel in anywhere, because that will then manipulate the reading. And you always want a true reading to begin with. So when you see gray, right away you know that that person is dehydrated, that they're not absorbing their water, possibly their nutrition. And so many people now are malnutrition. They eat too much crap and not enough substance. And so their body, even though they may look healthy, their body internally is collapsing because it's not being fed with good nutrition.
You can say something, Suzanne.
Yeah.
I would also suggested that if you're taking a reading on a bulimic, someone who's suffering from bulimic condition, that you're going to see the esophagus and even the mouth with teeth because of the acidity that's being brought back up through vomiting.
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of people, when they go to bed at night, if they start thinking about the stress in their day, and then if they didn't neutralize their stomach acid before they go to bed at night, that during the night, it's actually, causing a problem in their mouth. And then people are wondering why, their gum line is receding, at a younger age. It's because of that acid that's bubbling up during the night. So I do recommend that people take a little bit of, salt before they go to bed, like the Andean salt, a little sip of it, or microminerals or something that will help to neutralize the stomach acids.
I've also observed that my own personally, that if I'm very tired, that behind my left eye, it seems like that I just is very tired. And if I'm exhausted, it's behind the right eye. And it'd be interesting now that we've discussed this to see if that happens when I have a very exhausted feeling. If I see that some gray in that eye, or just interesting.
Yeah, well, always share, your findings, because for me, it's fascinating to learn from other people. But I can also, just going back to what you said, Dr. Emmett, I can validate the fact that people who have eating disorders, their esophagus will be gray. And you will see, because their stomach goes inward, not outward, that, they're having problems with food intake, right?
Yes.
And often you'll see their whole digestive system has collapsed.
I would expect too, if I'm examining someone and I see they've got a very high, a high pulse, I guess I'll be looking now at see what the chest is looking like and what the color is, if there's white in there, or if it's on, or maybe even on a very low pulse, if there's some gray in there.
Yeah. And that can be environmental as well, because when if people don't have fresh air coming into their environment and they're breathing, recycled air, that's going to have a problem on their respiratory system. And, I can have people with different conditions where some people, it'll go into excess and I'll see white in their chest, and other people will go gray, because they're just being affected differently. And it goes the same way with, why do some people, get sick, yet they've lived in the same household and other people didn't? It's based on your energetic patterns to begin with. If you already have a weakness in the ear and you're on your cell phone all the time, you might develop something to do with your ear versus somebody who has no weakness in their ear because maybe their upbringing was, not tainted with negativity that, you're constantly hearing, which could, in turn affect, at a later age, your capability of hearing. Right. And so again, we have to always look at, why people have different things developed.
I have one more comment, and that's it. And Frank Ludowski's suggestion about a grounding pad. We go back again to what the lady earlier suggested about the fact of that original reading. Grounding pad is not the first one you want to use. What's your comment on that?
Well, again, I want to get a reading without anything. I don't want any influence. Like I have some owners that tell their clients to drink a glass of water before they come. I have some people that, I don't do any of that, because if you don't normally drink water, then I'm going to see that. Why would I make you drink water that, again, could hydrate your cells when you're not a regular water drinker?
Well, I see that a lot in my chemistries of someone when I'm examining them. When they come on and do exactly what they normally been doing, I don't want them chewing gum. I don't want them drinking excess water, etc. I want their chemistry just as it normally is for that time of day.
Exactly. And then when you get a second reading, then you can marry up the first reading with the second reading to see what's the variables and what are the constants. And again, that's how you build the pattern of their energy over time, because I know at the beginning there were certain colors that were predominant in my aura because I had a set way of thinking and acting and emoting. And similarly, because I had broken my jaw and I had dental surgery and all these other things, I could see why my mouth was always flatlining. That was giving me indication of the damage that had been done. And so we have to probe and find out why, right? And that sometimes can take a little bit of time to get all the information. I didn't think about a lot of things when I first started, but had I had somebody who was as clever as me today, then I would have understood some of the questions I could have asked, where at the beginning I just strictly worked off of intuition. And people would say, oh, like here's an example. I had a woman who had gray in her armpit and it was quite toxic looking. And I said, sometimes when I see this color in the armpit area, it tells me that your deodorant, isn't good deodorant. And she said, oh no, I don't use deodorant. And I went, okay, well, there's something going on there. And, you know, I don't know what it is. Maybe you know. And she kind of paused and she goes, you know, that is interesting. I was diagnosed with, you know, lymph cancer years ago, and I had chemotherapy in that area. And that's the whole reason why I stopped using deodorant. And, oh, also I said, maybe it's the type of bra you're wearing is cutting off your circulation. And she said, ever since she had the breast cancer, she stopped wearing a bra. So everything she was answering me was indicating there should be no gray there, until I finally went, do you know what it could be? Because there's something going on there that I'm just not understanding, because it is a high level of toxicity. And she said she thought the toxicity was gone, but I still saw evidence of it.
I'm seeing toxicity, Suzanne, if somebody has in the armpit, in the lymph area, if someone has had a one of the shots for the COVID.
Okay.
So if they've had a COVID shot within the last 5 to 7 days, I'm seeing toxicity that clears up after another week.
Yeah, I can see that, because it's going to go into the lymph system, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Then, of all the organs that we test for are reflective, skin is never put on there. How did they? I mean, yet it's one of our major organs of the body. How do you see something with the skin?
Yeah, so the skin is very connected to the spleen. Okay, and whenever when somebody tells me that they have a skin condition, I'm always looking at the area of the organ where it is as well. Okay, so then you just have to kind of do it that way. But again, from what I understand, the spleen is a direct correlation to the skin, and I think the thymus gland as well is connected to the skin.
Why I bring that up is because the toxicities, impurities goes either through the lung, through the intestinal tract, through the bladder, kidneys, or through the skin.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, just a question.
Yeah. So for example, I had one client where they had orange in the ear, and it was a very tainted orange. And I said, I think you have candida in the ear. And I didn't even know you could get candida in the ear. And the client actually responded, oh my goodness, I was just diagnosed with candida in the ear, and I never knew that you could get candida in the ear. So that kind of blew me away, seeing that toxic orange in the ear. And like, normally I would say to somebody, do you notice that you have more liquid in your ear, that there's a bit of stickiness in there, or that you've got, like, when if people use a, what do you call it? Cotton swab, right?
Yeah.
Q-tip, thank you. When you put a Q-tip in the ear, if it comes out orange, that's indicating that there is, you know, acid in the ear. Right. And so we can see that. And that's why, like, when people blow their nose, if they have a lower frequency in their nose, like orange, they'll blow their nose and they'll see the you know, the phlegm, versus if people have white in the nose and they blow their nose, it'll be invisible.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you start to, you know, put pieces of the puzzle together as to what you're seeing with the biopulsar.
I wanted to share something with you, Susan.
Sure,
I had a
Pauline.
fair bit of stress in the last couple of weeks, you know, death of animals. And the one thing that's been a weak area is, for me, my scalp with psoriasis. And I've been using the Aura Cleanse 3 times a day, just really rubbing it into my scalp. And for the first time in a long time, my scalp's not itchy anymore.
Good.
Good old Aura Cleanse, bring it on.
Yeah, and try putting some of the salt brine in there as well. Okay, because then the salt brine will help to remineralize, and it will also help to kill any bacterial growth.
In there. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And, you know, thank you for sharing about the aura cleanser, because this is one of the things I do a lot myself, is wherever there's stress, I will aura cleanse that area more so, because wherever there's stress, there's indicating that, you know, there's not integrated thought patterns, you know, and emotions. And so again, I want to cleanse that area of any kind of programming that could be stuck there resultant from, you know, childhood.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that too.
Well, thank you for sharing, Pauline.
You're welcome.
Suzanne, can I jump in?
Absolutely.
So this is Ted under Zoe's picture. If you see, she
Ah!
was sweet enough to let me in.
Oh, yeah, because I saw
Hi,
Zoe's
everybody. I
name
see
come
ya.
up, but
Hello
the,
there.
yeah, the voice didn't match. Good to see you, Ted.
No, it did. Nice to see you. So I'm going to share an experience and ask a question.
Okay.
I'm going to be testing a lot of people. I tested somebody whose heart chakra was 3%. We did the test 4 different times. 2 weeks later, he complained of having chest pains. His wife said, we're going to the doctor. He said, no, it's gas. She forced him to the doctor, triple bypass, no heart attack. Is that one, other than having a broken heart, which I found 50 times in the last 2 months, right? Is that an indicator that low energy?
Yes.
Okay, that's the sharing example. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. We had a nurse that did some study, and she took 6 people who had triple bypass surgeries, and some of them she was able to do beforehand, and every single one of them, their heart chakra was in between 3 and 9%.
Great.
And even after the surgery, there was still the energetic weakness because they didn't heal the emotions.
So here's my question for you then. When the heart chakra is always at the highest in white, to me, it would be an overactive heart, right? Over energetic could be a problem.
Yeah.
So I'll just use me as an example, because that's how it is with my heart. And I just got a stress test, everything perfect.
Yeah.
No problem, no blockage, nothing. So is there another thing to look for when you see, because I've seen it in several people, heart being white?
Yeah. It could be the way you breathe. So, you know, take note of that, because a lot of times when you're breathing through the mouth and not the nose, then that will cause more hyperness in the heart. Okay. Also making sure you're drinking enough liquids, so you're getting the oxygen in your liquids. You can also check your iron level, right, to make sure that your iron is intact. What else can I just quickly throw at you there? Yeah, and you know, making sure you're not gulping air down versus just breathing naturally, right?
So that wouldn't be an indication if somebody's heart was white that they're in trouble, overactive, working too hard, really better go get it checked out with a cardiologist? Or
it can result in high blood pressure without a doubt. Okay. And then again, when it vibrates at a fast level for too long, eventually the organ will go, I can't keep working overtime. You're making me work 24/7. I need to take a break. And then all of a sudden it'll drop down. So sometimes there's that fine line between it going white and then gray quite quickly, you know, but of course we don't want that to happen. So we just got to find solutions. And this is where, you know, you would try to do as many green things as possible just to nurture the, you know, the heart, go back into anything that may have caused heartbreak in your life, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship with somebody you loved in that kind of role. It could just be a friend that could have broken your heart, or a family member that broke your heart or let you down, right? So any kind of emotion that relates to the heart, you would want to be looking at. And it could also be lack of self-love, you know, again, not wanting to deal with your own emotions, right?
Great. Thanks for that answer.
Suzanne, could that also be if someone who maybe built a business and then through this economics times and such that they lost it? That's a major loss too, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and that's why, you know, anything on that level where it's heartfelt, right? Because yeah, we're all affected differently, and this is why, you know, you can take, you know, 10 people that have diabetes, and their aura maps are going to be unique to them because their life learning experiences are different, their dietary habits are different. There's so many, you know, possibilities, right?
Yes, that's not a short one. That's a long-term thing that you're going to take a long while to get over something like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Loss,
Yeah.
the loss.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that even with myself, I noticed that I was always getting pain in the back. And when you get a pain in the back, that's a past issue. You know, so you've got to look at these things as to how you see in the body, and, you know, just going into a little bit of advanced aura diagnostic. Anything in the front, like the forehead, has to do with the future. Anything in the middle of your body is present, and anything that hits you in the back is the past. So the back has a lot to do with the past. The back of the head has to do with the past, whereas the forehead is about your cognitive abilities, thinking forward, you know, and then you have your midbrain, which is dealing with everything in the present moment. So whenever people feel something in the back, it has to do with the past. So as soon as I resolved that, I never got any more back pain behind the heart. Make sense? Cool. Okay, any other questions today? So that's it for today then. I hope you enjoyed today's class and you got some good information out of there. I focused more on the gray and the white because I thought that's those are colors that I don't talk much about. But anyways, we'll just keep the classes going and the knowledge sharing. So thanks everyone for joining today.
Thank you, Susan. God bless.
God bless. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Ciao for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.